Hello, I'm Sean Kent Hayashi with the Professional Development Group. I'm an executive coach. I help organizations build high-performing teams and inspiring leaders. One of the competencies that we all need in order to be a professional in workplaces today is the skill of emotional intelligence. I'm getting ready to kick off a workshop on this topic for a high-performing team. You can see we're just about to kick off. Getting ready. Come along. Have you ever noticed that it is really hard to lift another person's spirits if you can't lift your own? What does it mean to be inspiring? People who are highly motivated are inspiring. They know how to use their emotions to move things forward. And when we talk about the 5 competencies of emotional intelligence, we first begin with this sense of self-awareness. The average person has 80 experiences a year where they feel something on a little bit deeper level. But most people don't process themselves through their emotional experiences. Instead, they shove them down, they come out sideways, or they ignore them. And on the average, people only process themselves through about 3 emotional experiences in a year. But if we would set a goal for ourselves, just to start acknowledging, honoring, processing ourselves through an emotion a day or a week, we would dramatically increase our emotional intelligence. So when we talk about self-awareness, it's knowing what am I feeling in the moment. And one of the best ways to become self-aware is to start to ask yourself the question, what am I feeling right now? I want you to take a couple of deep breaths. When we take the deep breaths, what happens is we send a signal to our brain that we don't have to be in fear. But it also gives us a space for a little bit of clearing. And then you can say, what is the marinade? What's the emotional marinade that I'm sitting in right now? See if you can identify your own. What am I feeling right now? So becoming aware of the symptoms, in other words, how I'm holding my body, the thought patterns that are going on in me, because the words and the actions that I'm taking are triggering my emotional marinade right now. I have found there is a huge benefit to keeping an emotional intelligence journal. There's also a huge benefit to keeping a learning journal. And if you challenge yourself the next 30 days to track a couple times a day, what am I feeling right now? And how is that showing up in my body? Do I feel like I'm walking on sunshine? Am I light? Or is there an area that's tight or tense? And how does that relate to the thought patterns and the emotion that I'm in at the moment? You'll begin to see things. You'll begin to raise your awareness. James Pennebaker has done 40 years of research into the link between people writing about their emotions and the quality of their life. And part of what he has discovered is that those people who will do this kind of activity become happier, more fulfilled. They start to make better decisions. And people who have had a loss in their life, such as a loss of a job, a loss of a loved one, a loss of something that was meaningful to them, if they will do this activity regularly, they will be much more likely to move through the sadness, the upset, the disappointment. They'll be less likely to become depressed if they will process themselves through the emotions. What I want for you is that you get really good at noticing the physical symptoms in your body, the mental symptoms in your thought patterns, so that your self-awareness is extremely high as it relates to each of these emotions. Think about when you're triggered into each of these emotions. I'd like you to perhaps see if you can come up with an example of a time in the past where you were triggered into each of the emotions: love, joy, hope, sadness, envy, anger, and fear. And what did that look like? It's almost as if you're going back now and you're looking at a photograph or maybe even a short movie of that time. How were you holding your body? Was there a tightness somewhere? Was there tension somewhere? Was there perhaps a headache? What repetitive thoughts were going on? Open your books and you could go back to that section on the triggers, and you'll see in that section I'm also giving you space to think about the symptoms. And so this idea of the symptoms, when you're tight, what does being tight in your shoulders or having a stomach ache, which of the emotional marinades is that attached to for you? For some people it's sadness, for other people it's anger, for somebody else it's fear. I don't know what it is for you, but I'm asking you to think about it. So when you notice stiffness in your body, when you notice that you are just feeling open and expansive and you're taking deeper breaths and you're enjoying and you're noticing what's going on around you. Sometimes people will ask me the question, hey Sean, I don't see gratitude on the list. Which emotion is gratitude? What do you think? Where is that feeling of being deeply grateful for you? Joy. Yeah, for some people they'll say hope. For other people they'll say love. I have created a habit in my life. When I get in the shower in the mornings, I stand there and I let the hot water run over me and I just express deep gratitude for all the people who came before me that created the ability for us to enjoy indoor plumbing. My grandmothers, or perhaps great-grandmothers, your great-grandparents, didn't have the benefits of the kinds of hot water luxuries and bubble baths, Epsom salt baths that we can now do anytime we want. By creating a couple of rituals in your morning routine where you honor and you let them be triggers for you to experience gratitude, you'll tee yourself up for an emotional domino effect. If you can create a ritual, a pattern, a habit of expressing gratitude in your morning, make a list of 10 things you're grateful for every morning. Perhaps you do it while you're in the shower. Maybe you do it while you're driving to work. Maybe you do it as you're preparing your children's lunches. Whatever fits into your routine. By doing this, you trigger yourself right away into good feelings. A client of mine told me that one of the things that she does first thing in the morning is make her bed. And the reason she does this is because she loves how her bedroom looks when she turns around, turns the light off, and walks out of it. Now, somebody else might say that wouldn't trigger me. That would make me really annoyed because I got to take the extra 3 or 4 minutes to do that. It's got to be something that triggers you to feel good. When I did this exercise myself of creating an emotional intelligence journal, I discovered several things. I want to share a couple of them with you so that you can see the kinds of things that you will likely discover for yourself. But I want to remind you about that map. Just because something triggers me in a particular way doesn't mean it's going to trigger you in the same way, right? So we'll make space for that. But these are the kinds of things you're going to start to see in the journal. So fear, I discovered that fear is equated to fuzzy thinking, confusion, brain fog, not knowing what to say next, not knowing what to do next. If I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm stumped, it's probably because I'm afraid. I'm afraid maybe of social rejection. I'm afraid of not saying the right thing, not making decisions. I discovered that piles of paper or piles of stuff in my office, in my home, represents fear because it was a lack of willingness to make a decision about what to do with something. and sometimes this is a big aha moment for people. Disorganization, having too much stuff, is often about fear. Oh no, what if I give that away? What if I let that go and then I wanted it? I'm afraid. What if I make a bad decision? Well, when we learn to process ourselves through that, we can let go of the hoarding. We can let go of the piles of paper. I don't collect piles of paper anymore once I began to realize there was a connection for me to being afraid of making a bad decision. Rushing myself. Those of you who know me well know I can't stand to be late. If I am running late, I am really uncomfortable. I'd rather be an hour early than 5 minutes late for somebody. I just have this belief system, this wiring in my head that if I'm late, somebody will perceive that I think my time is more valuable than theirs is, and I don't want to send that message to anybody. But sometimes I'm legitimately running late. I wasn't anticipating that there would be a bus or a trailer or a road detour, and I'm going to be 5 minutes late. And so when I find myself in that situation, I'm afraid and I get tense in my stomach, and I have to take a couple of deep breaths and remind myself that most people in my life, if I pick up the phone and call them and say, I realize, based on the road traffic at the moment, I'm going to be 3 to 5 minutes late. Just wanted to give you a heads up. They'll forgive me and they'll appreciate that. And by taking that action, by doing that, I process myself through the fear so that I'm not sticking in the fear. Avoidance. Hiding in my office. Not initiating conversations that I need to be having. This is probably because I'm in the fear marinade. And I'll bet none of you can relate to this. Eating non-consciously. I tongue-in-cheek say that one Saturday morning, I woke up in the pantry eating Doritos. Now, there's nothing wrong with Doritos inherently, but I am somebody who eats gluten-free because gluten really makes me uncomfortable. And I was eating a food that I knew consciously would cause me to feel terrible. Well, it was at that time that I was keeping the Emotional Intelligence Journal. I had just begun. As I'm about to stuff more Doritos in my mouth, I said, what happened? This is a moment that I need to stop and process myself through the emotion rather than keep eating non-consciously. I don't need this. So what happened right before I ran to the pantry, closed the door, made sure no one knew I was there, and started scarfing down the bag of Doritos? My two stepsons were in the living room in an argument with each other. Now, have any of you ever seen a movie, a book, a story about a wonderful stepmother? No, they don't exist. All of the images in the world, it seems, are about nasty, mean, terrible stepmoms, and I was not wanting to be that. I didn't want to get typecast into that role. I wanted to be an open-hearted, loving, generous of spirit stepmom. And I was afraid of that story plotline. So I ran to the pantry and started scarfing down the Doritos. I had to step back and say, wait a minute, Sean, what do you do for a living? Yeah, I often help executives and teams work through conflict. If I can do that at work, can't I do that also at home? Yes. Let's use those skills that you have, Sean. I put the Doritos back on the shelf. I walked into the living room and I said, Alex, Kyle, let's talk for a minute. Let's talk about what just happened. Kyle, I'd like to hear your perspective on this. And hey, Alex, what's yours? And in a few minutes, it was resolved, done and over. There was no conflict and they were on to having fun. But it wouldn't have happened if I had stayed stuck in my fear, hiding in the pantry. All right, so now let's talk about another emotional marinade. These are some things that I learned about how I do sadness. Again, doesn't mean you do it this way, but if I catch myself feeling lonely and I don't take any action to initiate something with someone else, that's probably a red flag waving for me that I'm in the marinade of sadness. You see, I have lots of friends, and I love to walk, so I could reach out to one of my friends and say, Jennifer, would you come walk with me? And chances are, if she's available, she'll say yes. But if I'm stuck in sadness, I might not be willing to take that initiative, right? I have to be very careful about thinking about getting a new pet. I happen to love puppies and dogs, and come on, bring them on, right? And when that's coming from a place of being open-hearted and love, joy, then it's a good decision. But when it's a place of trying to fill a hole, trying to fill something else that's missing, that might actually be about sadness. I need to check myself. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I've discovered for me there's a connection between that, I'm overwhelmed, sense of I've taken on too much, and sadness. Watching too much TV to numb out, just tuning out, turning off, shutting down. All of that for me is linked to sadness. Talking about or focusing on things that I have no control over, things that I can't make a difference in, and then allowing myself to get frustrated, upset about them. Sadness, red flag waving. Blaming someone else for the state I'm in. This is also an emotional trigger for me. I'm sad. And finally, how much green Wedgwood does a person really need? How many pair of shoes does a person really need? I became aware that sometimes I will go look for certain items, again, sort of trying to fill this void, and what it's actually about is me not processing myself through my sadness. It's coming out sideways. Now, you notice here in my slide that I say shopping on eBay for things I don't need, and I have to share with you that eBay is a client of mine, and when I did this presentation for them, they said, wait a minute, please make sure you tell people that eBay is not associated with sadness. And I will say that's absolutely the case. I bought lots of things I love on eBay and have enjoyed it. But I have to catch myself when I'm in certain types of purchasing mode and realize that may actually be a symptom of some sadness lingering in me. And it's much better for me to deal with the sadness than it is for me to go buy stuff I didn't really need. Can you relate to that? I see some nods. All right, let's talk about hope. Symptoms that I'm in the marinade of hope. I see obstacles on the horizon, but I'm not afraid of them. I'm willing to tackle them. I have a belief system that says, hey, if we work together, if we team on this, if we cover each other's blind spots and play to each other's strengths, we can overcome this, we can do this. When I'm thinking and instead of either or, we could do both. Let's try both. When I'm in an experiment with myself, when I invite you into an experiment with me, and I'm not feeling like we're going to fail. Instead, I'm feeling like we're going to learn as we go along. This is hope. So able to inspire myself and others, that's born out of being in the emotional marinade of hope. Optimistic despite obstacles. Willing to connect with people, willing to hear different ideas, willing to engage, willing to introduce myself. So by tracking your emotions in this way over a 30-day period, you will start to see patterns. You will start to see the trends. You will identify your emotional set point. What is an emotional set point? It's the predominant emotion that you are experiencing. Have you ever met somebody who seems to be stuck in anger? Or maybe somebody who's stuck in sadness? I'm seeing a lot of nodding right now. Yeah. And you know what's fascinating about that is when you say to the person, I sense that you're sort of stuck in anger. What do they say? No, I'm not. What would make you think that? Or you say to somebody, I sense maybe you're a little blue. You're stuck in some sadness. No, I'm not. They're unaware. Well, how do you become aware? You do this exercise. One of my coaching clients agreed to do this, and he owned a consulting business, a market researchy type of consulting business. And he came back to me after doing the exercise and said, Sean, I had no idea that I was habitually sad. He said the only way I would have caught this was by doing this exercise. And he was engaged in emotional intelligence coaching with me at the time. And so we were able to help him process through that stored, stuffed down sadness. A year and a half later, he came back to me and was excited, awed by how much he had grown in his emotional intelligence. But more importantly, his business had doubled. Why? Who do we like to work with? Do we like to work with people who are stuck in sadness? Do we like to work with people who are perpetually angry? No, we actually do not. We really enjoy working with people who are coming from love, joy, and hope most of the time. Now, am I saying that you should ignore your sadness? Am I saying you should ignore your fear or anger? No. Those are actually really powerful, useful emotions. But we've got to know how to read them. We've got to know what to do with them. Thank you so much for joining me today. Click that subscribe button below, and you'll also see there's a bell. If you click that bell, you'll be notified each time we post a video. Write in a comment. Share a thought with us.